Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology. What's that? That's the study of books and reading and notebooks and writing mixed with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. Here, you'll find episodes exploring the reading and writing life and how they can make our actual lives better. You'll get book recommendations and notebooking prompts around particular themes, and you'll even hear from authors and special guests who can fuel our reading and writing hearts and help us take inspired action in our own daily practices. So, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Get Literate podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, and I'm excited for today's episode. Have you ever met someone, whether that was in person or saw them online, and as you learn more about them, you realize that they are just who you need to know right now? There's some sort of connection that you want to dive into. Well, today's guest is that person for me. We first connected on my other podcast, Kidlit Love, but a quick look into her work made it crystal clear that we needed a conversation beyond a single book, and that's why she's here today. Sharon Frances is an author, illustrator, and mental health advocate who's here today to talk about all things reading, writing, creativity, and healing. My favorite things to talk about. So we're just going to go straight to today's episode. So, Sharon, welcome to Get Literate. I'm so glad you're here today, and I can't wait for wherever our conversation goes.
Aw, you just touched my heart. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me. And I'm really excited to talk about all things reading, writing, creativity, and healing.
Yeah, me too. So, why don't we start with introductions? Can you give us a little backstory, a little background of you, your work, your writing, and just your beliefs around this space that we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, well, I am somebody who has struggled with emotional mental health issues since I was quite young. My first memories of depression were about 8 years old. I've dealt with many adverse childhood experiences. You know, you can do that list where you can count the number, and my number's pretty high. So struggling with the kind of uncertainty of a lot of things related to my family of origin. My body went into, the depression mode and really never got out. And so I've been dealing with that since I was quite young. And by the time, and I started writing when I was very young. I wrote my first play when I was 10 about a girl who ran an orphanage. So I've always also been interested in caregiving and being with young people. And I wrote my first essay about being a teacher in sixth grade. And I just knew I wanted to be with young people and be in spaces that can help nurture them and that they can be seen through their own experiences and discoveries. And that's how I see learning, that education is experience, and that through reading, writing, and creativity, kids can be seen, people can be seen. And we all crave that, whether we've been through hardship or not. We all need that because we're always in relation and we're always also ourselves. And we're trying to understand that tension or movement. And so I became a teacher, and I grew up in Southern California. So I've always been interested in bilingualism. And so I explored my Spanish as my second language. I became a bilingual teacher, and that was really my first eye-opening to marginalization and inequities in education, and really seeing how my experiences as a white person, a white child going through school, was very different from my fellow students who were not white and ended up stuck in ESL and tracked so that their ability to go right into college was very limited. And I realized that I really wanted to work on helping to make bilingual education and English language learning, well, it already was very, very rich, but then the systems in place really prevented kids from moving from tracks. And so I became very interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the space of education. I'd always been interested in it since I was young. I was a young reader of Ms. Magazine, and they had these stories for free children. And I would like run to the mailbox and hope that the Ms. Magazine episode issue was out, and that Stories for Free Children would be in it, and I would read and like just learn all about these progressive women and what they were doing and how they were fighting for things, and it was very, very empowering. And so I learned really young that that our voices are important, and yet I was struggling with not being able to express myself in this environment that was very stifling to me emotionally. And so as I grew older, as a teacher, I was working on those things, felt very ill-equipped, and became a teacher educator. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to become someone who could create environments in educational spaces that could realize some of the goals that I had for supporting diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I think it's an imperative in an environment we have right now where that word has been co-opted as something very negative. I found it always to be our strength, our wealth as a people and as a human race. And so as a teacher educator, that was my commitment. And I specialized in social justice and working through the arts to do it. So that just was because I've always been creative. And so I thought, I want to use all of our arts in order to, because we all do that through our cultural production. All of our communities, all of us as people have that creativity inside of us. And so I became very, very interested in that relationship between the arts, healing, and being seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got breast cancer in 2018, I really had to take a pause on my career of 25 years in teaching and start to really look at what I wasn't really healing in myself. And because it was just a hit to my system, I was stage 3. I went through very rigorous treatment. It was very hard on my body. And so I've been committing myself since to really supporting mental health with communities that have been suffering, and then how to, in general, have difficult conversations about topics and also about emotions and processing emotions. And so that's where my writing started to come in. And here I am as that publishing my first novel, an illustrated novel in verse. And so I'm very excited. Later we'll talk about that, I know, but that's in a nutshell, the journey that got me here and to you.
Yes. Yes. And the first of a couple of congratulations, I will say, around that book. That is such an amazing accomplishment. Book
Thank you.
birthdays are the best.
Right? I like that.
Yeah. We have we have so much in common that as I started to kind of find out more about you, I was like, we just have to have a conversation. I also wasn't, well, I am an educator. I was an educator of little people, teaching them how to read and write. I realized there were bigger things I needed to know about, I needed to
Yeah.
feel better about, I needed to help change. Went into teacher education, where this is my 20th year at my university, where I am all about teaching teachers not only how to teach kids how to read, but why it matters to their lives,
Mhm.
why it literally is a tool for growth, for transformation, and yes, like we're talking about today, for healing. I've also gone through experiences in childhood that have unfortunately repeated themselves in adulthood because I have not learned that lesson, perhaps, to take care of myself so much, that show me, as it is you, reading and writing is it's an essential part of wellness
Mhm.
because of what happens on the page. Like we've talked about feeling seen in the world, and I feel like when that always doesn't happen, whether it can't happen, it's not happening for whatever reason, I have always found that the page does. Whether I'm reading and I see myself there, or I'm writing and the page allows me to put myself there, the page is where it begins. And I can tell that I have struck an emotional chord, even though no one else can. I'm assuming you agree with me.
Yeah. I mean, I became a lit major and a women's studies major in college, and it was reading those books about people's lives, who didn't look like me, who hadn't had backgrounds like me, and yet their struggle was so parallel. And even if it wasn't like the exact struggle, it was this idea that I could be hit by so many circumstances, and you know what? I'm gonna figure out how to keep going. I'm gonna figure out how to become the person I've always imagined I could be. And that was the through line for every book I love to read, for every class I love to take, was because of books like that.
Mhm. They're transformational tools. They're little portable gifts of magic. And today we're talking primarily about how they are catalysts for healing.
Yeah.
Whether it's reading them or writing them, or I should say creating them as well, because of the more artistic aspect to it. I would love for you to dive into that because you're using writing, and your book is published evidence of that as a tool in the healing
Yeah.
process. So I'd love for you to talk about the connections that you make between writing and healing that perhaps listeners could start to imagine for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to go back to um, my struggles with depression in college and then repeating that process through breast cancer. And that is when because I struggle with depression, and there are a lot of people who write who have emotional issues. Um, it was writing the pain that helped the pain subside, or it helped the pain, me kind of acknowledge the pain and get to a place through it. So this idea for me with depression is like, it's a visitor. It's not going to go away. I've had it since I was 8 years old. It's not like going to disappear when you have, let's say, diabetes. It's not going to disappear, but we have to find a way to live with this thing, or chronic illness, chronic pain.
Mhm.
We have to find a way to live with this thing that is our burden, and yet it can also be this window into something inside that can connect us to others and connect us but more to ourselves. So for me, when I was feeling this depth of sadness, I allowed myself with my pen and paper, or later, like, just the weird thing of having that post open on Facebook and just typing it in like I'm going to share it with someone allowed it to come out. I may never press post, but
Yes.
there was something about like just this idea that it was going to go out for someone else to see that allowed me to flow. And so in that moment, or in those hours of feeling that pain, um, which can be very stifling and it can be very arresting. And that's what's so scary, is that you're like in this space where you're like, I don't even know, like, is it gonna end? I mean, I have to keep reminding myself, yeah, it's a visitor, it's gonna go. But like in the moment, it feels like you are in the depths and it is not going away, and you're gonna be there for who knows how long. And so one thing I would do is I would start to go on a walk. So I'd always put on my shoes and I'd start to go for a walk. And then I'd start to notice things. And it was just like allowing myself to be in the moment of movement and looking around. And I'd see the clouds, the bird, the trees, the house, the home, the people, the water, whatever, wherever I was, I would start to notice. And then I would allow myself to like free associate between what I saw and the emotions. And it was in, and that's why poetry really works for me, because it's about that like um, concentrated moment rather than like a full narrative. And even though I wrote a novel, it's a novel in verse. So I was able to take like this one idea and explore it for my character. And then the next moment happens, but then she also gets that in that moment. So I would like, just in the moment of the sadness, I would go out and look and like practice those kind of like grounding exercises, but not explicitly, just more like allowing it all to flow.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, my brain's like, and I'm on fire. And then I go back home, boom, and I start writing. And it's like, it's the greatest thing. Like anybody can do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, for one thing, I never imagined I would be writing a book. Like I just wrote just because it came to me. It's like whatever images, words, thoughts, every themes, any of it, I would just put it down. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, this is something.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until breast cancer that I started sharing it on Facebook. Like I'd write that in and I'd hit send, because I was diagnosed in 2018, and I'd hit post, and people would start to say, thank you so much for sharing your journey. They would say, thank you so much. You know, this is something that I'm experiencing. I don't have cancer, but I'm struggling with this. And your poems are helping me get through what I'm going through. And I thought, wow, this means something bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just letting myself have that moment in the writing and acknowledge what I was going through the writing, that then connected me to so many other people who are struggling too.
Yeah. I am a big morning page person. So I love Julia Cameron, and I don't even know how long my morning streak is, but I am proud to say that I every morning by 5 a.m. I am sitting there with my pencil, and everything just comes out on the page, right? It doesn't judge. It's non-evaluative. It doesn't care what I say. No one will ever see it. And one of the things that kind of came out and jumped out at me on the page, I started thinking about when you were talking, because it feels very aligned. I have a lot of physical pain that I deal with. And I realized not too long ago on the page, it became crystal clear that for a long time, I have been trying to run from
Mm,
the pain. I have been trying to fight the pain. I have been trying to do everything, right, to get that to stop. And in the process, have caused myself more of it.
yes.
And
Yes.
it is those realizations that I don't know if I would have come to
Yes.
unless I just allowed myself to just, as you said, just be present and dump it out and associate and not care where it is. And then all of a sudden something comes out of it. For me, it was a slap in the face realization of what I was doing to actually hurt myself in the long run. And for you, it's this idea of, oh, I could share this, right? And that's a whole nother layer of courage. But when you do,
Yeah.
the domino effect that has when you take something from your page and you help put it on someone else's. And I'm realizing I didn't even know I was being punny because it's a Facebook page. But anyway,
Yeah.
that is a powerful thing that happens. You let yourself be with it, you see where it goes, and seeing where it goes on the page is one possibility for many of us listening, because we love reading and writing. And it just moves us forward. I feel like it can get us unstuck and
Yeah.
out of whatever that phase is, as you said, may not go away, but can ebb and flow,
Right.
and we can deal with it.
And then on the other hand, when you said like that it hit you what you were doing when you were running away, like as I was going through my therapy, my own personal therapy after breast cancer, one of the main question was, what is toxic to you? As the oncologist said, I really want you to look at your life and like figure out what is too stressful, what is hurtful, because you want to reduce those, because cancer loves stress. Cancer loves those hormones. And so you want to just find ways to reduce that as best you can. We can't control everything, but try to find, like, really look at your life. And I'd been doing that forever with therapy. I've been in therapy since I was 20, antidepressant medications since I was 20, like working through so many things. But I had this newfound desire to save my life. It was like all of a sudden I was hit with, am I going to be alive for my child and myself and maybe my marriage, although that didn't work out. But that's okay because I did that look. And that was one of the things that wasn't healthy anymore. And I gave it a good try of 20 years. So, but one of the things I did when you said you were running from your pain was, as I was analyzing all those factors that were extra stressful, I realized that I had been running from, literally running, exercise running, overrunning, over exercising, to run from my fear of death because of my father's first cancer when I was 7. He died of brain cancer 3 days after my diagnosis. So running from death and running from my own body, trying to, I connected when you said earlier off camera that we had talked about working with people with eating disorders. I've had body image disorders, body dysmorphia, and I was using exercise as my purging of calories. And I was kind of like, I was so embarrassed and ashamed of that I didn't ever admit it to anyone, including myself. I was just like, oh no, I like exercising. But I would obsess about over exercising. If I hadn't gotten exercise in by a certain time, I would start to look at my body and say, well, then that's going to, and this and this and this, and really allowing that toxic culture of objectifying our bodies as women just has infiltrated my brain. And I've got a whole long story of my childhood about how that started. So I recognize that, you know what, that running from myself is a theme across so many aspects of my life. And the writing and starting to connect back with myself, it wasn't about that piece, the body dysmorphia, the over exercising. It wasn't about that. But the writing and trying to reconnect with myself allowed me to then acknowledge that component of myself that I was so embarrassed of. So I'm thankful for the writing, and I'm thankful for the movement, just the walking, not that over exercising, but just being out and being mindful and being present with myself and my thoughts and my creativity that allowed me to connect with a piece that I had ignored since I was started when I was 14 years old.
That's the power of the page. Truly.
Power of the page.
Truly. Which is a good time to bring up Ash and Feather, right? Because that is ultimately a product now that you are sharing with the world as it relates to your story. So tell us about it. Shout it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, shamelessly shouted, huh?
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for Stephanie for just being willing to share this moment with me on your podcast and with your listeners, and to share that space, because you have created something so amazing. And that quote of the power of the page, I want to make an art piece about that, because it is what allowed this 7-year project to come into the making. I started it in 2018 as a series of journal entries. It was after my dad passed, and we've always had a really tough relationship. And so I was imagining this family that could have been the family that I wished I had had. And when I was mourning the passing of a person who could no longer help me build a relationship that I wished I had. So I was like mourning the potential of a relationship, which is that complex grief. And so Ash and Feather became my vision for a family that's going through brain cancer. And it's not easy. And it's not even like completely what the story is about. I wanted to envision her, this girl, Phoenix, and how she becomes who she is in the background, in the context of cancer. Because I never really acknowledged cancer and its impact, as I said, running from death, right? Running from my this fear that my dad would die since I was 7, and I didn't even know what I was. So, so out came Ash and Feather, 7 years in the making. It was journal entries. It became a script. It became a podcast. It became a play that was read out loud. And then I eventually went back to my love, which is poetry, and said, I really want to envision this as a novel in verse, because novels in verse are my very favorite type of novels to read. And I write poetry. So I was like, I really want to try this. I want this story to become something that many, many people have accessibility to. And so if you don't mind, if I could read the back of the book.
Please, please do.
Okay. So here she is. By the way, this is the hardest piece of writing to write. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, to boil it down into one thing and then make it
Yes.
also something people are excited about. Whew,
Yeah.
harder than 240 pages of poetry, let me tell you. Ash and Feather. When 14-year-old Phoenix learns of her parent Eagle's cancer diagnosis, her shoulder blades start to itch. It's the end of summer vacation, 8th grade starts next week, and Phoenix's world collapses. Every hall she runs down, every room she hides in, Phoenix feels herself changing, growing wings while Eagle may be dying. She builds a new nest from the comfort of grandparent duck, counselor hen, and sweetheart Ing. But cancer is like a coyote howling in the hills, waiting for Phoenix to land so it can destroy everything. If she's to rise from the ashes of this uncertain world, one of surgery and medicine, classes and teachers, Phoenix must learn to feel everything and become the bird she's always imagined.
So good.
Oh,
Oh,
so here she is. And as I realize now, a big theme in this book is about bodily autonomy, because she's both bird and girl. And a lot of when I was pitching it to agents, they're like, oh, maybe she becomes a bird because of the cancer. And, this doesn't quite fit with my, a lot of agents will say that doesn't quite fit with
yes.
my slate of books right now. That's fine. I got to talk to somebody and she said, well, maybe the bird she's a bird when things are hard. And I'm like, but the thing is, she already uses this idea of a bird, or she is a bird since she's very young.
Yeah.
So that was something that, as I got feedback, I started to add layers back into the story, because her bodily autonomy is like, I don't need to question that I'm part bird. Like, I don't need to question myself as an author that she's part bird. We are who we are, and our identities don't need to be questioned from the outside. As a writer, it needs to be clear, right? That what that is and why it is in the book. But from the perspective of within the character, that's who she is. And it's the strength that she pulls from being free to fly, from being untethered.
Yeah.
That helps her grow. And my job, I felt like as a writer, was to gently hold her so she could become who she is. And as I met her and I learned who she was, I learned more about myself than I was able to hold myself to.
We just need a crying break for a moment.
Yeah.
And I will add, and it will probably make us tear up more, that you then hold that space for us and anyone who reads it.
Thank you. That's my goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes being an indie author to accomplish that.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
which is a whole nother conversation, right? That we could go into. But I want to talk more about the creativity part, because it is words on a page. It is poetry. It is emotion. It is connection. It is all of those things. But it takes this creative ability and belief, right? To believe in yourself, to put it on the page. And writing, I was always the kid who said, I'm not creative. Creativity is for my artistic friend or the people that can make some sort of product that looks like it should, in my mind. And of course, as I get older, I realize that creativity is actually a process and not
Yes.
just a product. And there's great power and great strength and great healing in that creative process as well. And from what I know about you and my sneaky peeks at you online, and now in our conversation here, like you embody that creativity in so many different ways to so many different degrees. And so I want you to talk about that piece too.
Thank you. Well, I really resonate with what you said about when you were talking about your morning pages and not judging yourself and allowing that to happen. It's amazing to me how I can have this significant doubt about myself in all aspects of my life. And yet, not all, but in a lot of aspects of my life. And yet, when it comes to creativity, I'm like, you said it takes confidence. I don't even see it as such. And I appreciate from the outside, it might appear that way. I think it's just the way I've survived. Like it's just part of me. It's so intrinsically part of me. It's like, you hear about a young person who's always had music in their lives. They've always drummed, they've always sang, and I feel like that with me. Like I've always made things and
Mhm.
um, been and danced and moved. And it just was like this part of me. And yet I understand that for a lot of people, those messages that cause me to look at my own body and judge it, those messages of hierarchy, who's to be valued and who's not, what's to be valued and what's not, can deeply affect us in our own then stopping of expressing our own creativity.
Yeah.
I think most people who live creative lives believe deeply that everyone has creativity inside them.
Yeah.
It's something we see when kids are young and they're skipping down
Right.
the street, or they're singing a song in the grocery store, or they're they're making marks on the page, and we put them up as a gallery on our walls of our living room. That creativity gets stifled as we discipline the adult body, as we discipline the adult mind, because now we're creating little workers. Now we're creating little, you know, um, society members of whatever adult society members mean. I think for me, that's why I'm so connected to childhood, because I love that unfettered expression of childhood. And I love that in me. And I want to encourage that love for other people who may have lost it or who are disciplining it out of themselves with those messages like, well, I'm not good enough, like I can't draw a person. I don't know how to draw a person. It doesn't look like that. And then comparing it to something. And so I think in another space, I had termed it like radical creativity. And for me, I feel like the radicalness is like, not it is pushing yourself not to be governed by this judgment, and take that voice out of your head or talk to that voice and say, that's an old story. And the story is that I have something in me that I need to say. I have something in me I want to express. And so what we can do, and Stephanie, you had talked about doing this as well with groups that you're in, is to facilitate opportunities for people to express themselves in a safe space that's not judgment, that's not us walking around and saying, oh, that's so good. Oh, that's so good. No, we're like, oh, wow, tell me about what you're making. Or like, giving prompts to get people out of that voice in the head and into the material, whether it's writing or clay or a song or their bodies. And so the facilitation of those experiences really can empower people to reconnect with themselves. And that's, I think, the goal of creativity, is that it's who we are.
Yeah.
But somehow we've lost it, or the society has disconnected us from our own creativity inside of us.
Yeah. I can relate to that on so many levels. I was the kid who used to love to do all of those things and
Yes.
who just decided for herself. I can't think of even if there was no external outside person saying, "Well, you're not creative. You don't know how to draw. You can't make that."
Right.
That was all self-induced for one reason over the other.
Mhm.
Those unconscious, kind of perhaps implicit perfectionistic messages that I may or may not have put on myself as a kid. And part of your work now is to help, right? You are doing this work. You facilitate sessions, workshops with adults, with kids. What advice do you have for someone like me, for other people who want to get back to that creativity
Mhm.
or who forgot that they even could have that kind of creativity in their lives? What do you say to those people about trying to find that space again?
Mm. Well, I thought the first thing that came to my mind was I wanted to just take like a deep breath,
Hmm.
and just like open the space inside of me to that question, because each person has a variety of reasons, of contexts that have permeated their space, their boundaries. And sometimes we hold ourselves really tight because there's fear of what might happen if we express or if we are vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is at the core of being creative as a process, not a product. So the first thing I would say is that for people to, for listeners, for all of us to really think about the goal of, I want to be creative, right? Like I want to learn to play the guitar. I love to sing. I don't know how to carry a tune per se, but I'm okay. I want to play the guitar because I would love to be able to strum and sing with myself. I'm terrified of doing that. It is vulnerable. It's going to sound bad, like bad from a perspective of when I listen to a guitarist on my, in my earbuds,
Right.
it's not going to sound like that. But I'm going to take that voice out, say it's not that it's going to sound bad, it's that it's in process. And
Yes.
the process is about me exploring that sound of music that is so precious to me, that connects in something so that I can be more fully myself. And so I think part of it is about one, like really taking that voice of judgment and setting it aside. And when it happens, acknowledging it, like I just did when I was talking, acknowledging it, and continuing to set it aside, embracing the process. So the voice, talking to that sucker, the process rather than the product. I'm not looking at the product and again judging it. I'm embracing the process for what it's going to do for me, and maybe finding spaces with others who have a shared goal, who would like to do that, like a drum circle, right? Or like a support group, a creative support group, or a crafting club, or a writing group, or whatever it is, a quilting circle, whatever it is, a dance, just taking a dance class, even if it's like, oh, I know I'm not going to be able to memorize the whole dance. If that's not the point, because that if we're taking the product aside, we're focusing on process. So we deal with the judger, we focus on process, we find creativity and connection if we are people who are not in a place to do that, that we allow ourselves to connect with ourselves. And just finding what might make you connect even more with yourself, and just do that. Just
Yeah.
try it one time a day, one time a week, make a goal for yourself and just try that. Doing those morning pages, maybe doing a little bit of art journaling, right? If
Right.
that's something you want to do, and just include that in your pages or whatever it is. So I think those are my little pieces of advice.
Those are perfect pieces of advice. And what's funny is that, we often will sit here and say, "Oh, I'm not creative," or "I don't know what I would do. I don't know what it would be."
Yes, well, there's
But
that.
you know what? I feel like as you were going through those steps, like quiet that voice, like find your people. I know what it would be. I
What
know
is it?
exactly what I would do. I would do two things, Sharon. First thing I would do is I would buy myself an Apple Pencil and I would finally learn to use Procreate that has been sitting on my device for I don't know how long, and finally learn to hand letter the beautiful bookish quotes that I have been collecting in my journal for years.
That's
That's
it.
number one. Number two, I have always wanted to decorate cookies and cakes like nobody's business. So
You
I
got it.
I know what they would be. And you're right, it's that fear of, well, oh, should I be doing something else? Is there something more productive? The outcome
There's
won't
that.
be that way. And
Yeah.
all of that wraps up. But as you were just one by one kind of knocking those things away, I knew exactly what it would be. And now I feel like, well, I could do something little, with that. It feels those steps that you offered are different than what you might Google and say, how do you boost your creativity? Because you're getting at the root of it, which is usually us being in our own way, not
Yes.
not the outside pieces. And I feel like as you just went through there, like I knew exactly what it would be. And that feels kind of nice right now.
Absolutely. And I just want to add one thing, which is because as a social justice person, I'm always in relation between the personal and the structural, so that there are always these outside influences, cultural influences that really can infiltrate or colonize our minds to the point where when we have that judging voice, that came from somewhere.
Yeah.
It's now ours. I only hear it as me. But what women's studies did for me as a major was it showed me that way back from those stories for free children that I with Ms. Magazine, I saw as an adult, oh, it's not just me. I sat in a group of 100 people in Intro to Women's Studies, and she had us draw a picture of our bodies and put stars on the parts that we liked and circle the parts we didn't. And then we raised our hands, and it turned out that 90%, 99% of the people circled body parts they didn't like that were core to functioning,
Oh,
right? I don't like my hips. I don't like my stomach. I don't like, but all those things, all those traditional, well, that came from, they said, okay, well, let's look at that. If all of you are doing that, if I'm doing that, where did that come from?
hmm,
You have a voice in your head that's telling yourself you don't like those things, but it's not coming from you.
right.
That voice, it's become you. So it's very personal. But when
And
they
then
say the personal,
a permission
right,
slip to uncover that now. Oh,
yes,
that was powerful.
the permission slip.
Yeah.
That drawing was a permission slip. Now, I was 18 when I did that drawing, and it took me until I was 43 years old to acknowledge my own issues with my body. So it's not like it was a quick journey,
Right.
but a seed had been planted, a permission slip had been given to by that professor to encourage me to start to understand the relationship between myself and the outside world.
Hmm.
And I think that relates to creativity
Yeah.
because that outside world is very interested in what's going to sell. What are people going to share? What are people going to fund? Right? What are people, and then all that is related to all these other things.
Yeah.
Right? And so for us to say, you know what, that's what I mean about that I'm not going to be governed by that because I'm going to take that rubric and say that I don't value that rubric.
Hmm.
That rubric made me a perfectionist because I thought I could live up to those standards. And I decided that a lot of that created toxicity that helped to make me the kind of person that made me very susceptible to disease.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of research on that.
Yeah. Yes, there is. We need to have like a series of conversations here
Right?
because that's what it is.
Okay, that's good. This is part one.
Yeah, and it comes back to the page again because when you figure
Let's do
that
it.
out,
Yep.
on the page when you're writing, and then that leads to reading that book that
Yep.
tells you about this, which leads to you figuring out this about yourself, and that leads to the next phase, and it's this cycle. of reading
Iterative.
and writing and healing and
Yep.
learning that is just it's I don't even know the word for it. Life changing doesn't seem like
It's
the right word.
empowering,
It's
it's
everything.
liberating,
Yeah.
it's all things wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so on your website, I yet another ways that I connected with you. The tagline for this podcast is read, write, learn, love. And
Amazing.
the tagline on one of your websites is read, feel, create, heal. Tell
I
us
mean,
about that.
we are lost sisters,
We are.
found.
That's right. That's right. Found sisters. Tell me about that work with those four important words.
Read, feel, create, heal. Well, one of the things that I did after cancer was I started doing workshops with families impacted by cancer. And I wrote my first book, which is a children's book about a mother who has cancer and her little girl um, and this little green monster that is how the little girl help processes the cancer. The little green monster kind of creates joy and imagination and creativity and helps her get through this hard time, which is again like the theme in Ash and Feather, but it was for the little ones, right? And um, so as I was writing, and I mean, it's just all the things, Stephanie, like all the things that you just do. And then you start to think about, well, how can I express it in a few words? And that's what I was doing. I was working with families and I had met my partner and we were thinking, we'd like to do more of this. And it was right before COVID and we created this project called Wellbeing Studio. And we started doing online workshops because I had been doing them in person even during my treatment. But when COVID happened, there was this real need for online things for kids to do, for families to do. And all of a sudden, there's no more in hospital um, care, right? That social services care for families who are going through this. And so we really were able to connect with a lot of people. And we expanded our programming to work with, in general, with families because we all needed to process our emotions during that time. We all needed to feel. We were terrified. There was so much dying. There's so much. It was just the hardest thing, right? And so those workshops became core for my health during that time and core for a group of people, including a group of ninth graders who we did work on my podcast version of Ash and Feather, and they did dancing. They were like brand new ninth graders during COVID, and they were able to connect in creative ways.
Yeah.
They were processing healing, and it turns out there was a one teenager, one ninth grader whose parent had cancer, and another one who was struggling with body issues. And they both, messaged me and said, "Thank you so much for this." And that's the healing part, right? It was like we were exploring who we were and connecting and building this community of ninth graders during COVID, reading, feeling, where they were creating, they were making work, they were making writing, they were dancing, and then healing. And
Mhm.
it just made sense, it just
Yeah.
like that, those things all kind of flowed together in my goals for what I hope when I work with people in this expressive way.
Yeah. I feel like I need another breath. I'm like, we could go in so many directions for so long, but we do have to wrap up the
Mm.
episode. And so I want to make sure I give you the space to tell everybody, tell listeners, like where can they find you? Where can they get more of this creative writing, healing, hold space for them? Where can they find you?
Well, I'm primarily on social media. I'm on Instagram at Sharon Frances Me, and I have a website which is www.sharonjoyfrancis.com. And that Wellbeing Studio, we have we've stopped our workshops for now in that space, but I do have a link to that work on my website. It's wellbeings.studio, and I have a lot of recorded work, so people can still go and do things using the recordings. And there's there are blogs and ideas for different creativity things that families can do. And I'm still always open to doing new workshops, especially in relation to my book. So that's what I'll be doing right now is, April 1st is the birthday that comes out in the world of Ash and Feather. And then I'll be at different bookshops in Central and Southern California. And then I'm open to doing like Zooms and different virtual things with the book. But you can find me on Instagram. I also have an Art for Democracy series, and I've been working on just promoting different messages around supporting people during this difficult time. And so that's also on Instagram and then, of course, on my website. So I really, really appreciate you having me, Stephanie, and for the work that you do, committed to getting the word out about this this process of reading and writing and creativity and healing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to put all of those links that you shared together in the show notes to make it really easy for people to find you. And we're just going to say to be continued because I think there's more that we have to say.
Let's go.
Thank you,
I look
Sharon.
forward to it.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. Learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing, if you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and it builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.